My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 36 years old. And by the time my sister raised her champagne glass at Christmas dinner, I already knew she was about to turn me into the evening's entertainment. "You're already 35 and still single?" she said, loud enough for every cousin, spouse, and family friend at the table to hear. "Must be tough spending Christmas alone." The laughter came quickly. My mother laughed too, then waved a hand as though humiliation somehow disappeared when it was labeled harmless. "She's just joking." I set my glass down. "Don't worry about me," I said. "I've been married for a long time." My mother froze in the middle of her toast. My sister's smile vanished. My father stared at me as though he had missed an entire chapter of his own family's story. Someone asked who my husband was. I looked at the glossy redevelopment proposal beside my mother's plate, the one my family had spent 6 months preparing for a private investor they believed could save their failing business. "You already know his name," I said. "You've been begging for a meeting with him since June." No one laughed. Then my sister reached for the proposal, but I placed my hand on it first. There was something else they didn't know. The document contained my work, my credentials, and a signature I had never authorized. By the end of that night, my family would learn who I had married, why I had kept it from them, and what their favorite daughter had risked to make herself look successful. Before I tell you what my husband said and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I want to see how far this story travels. My family owned Whitmore and Rowe Heritage Works, a 3-generation company based in St. Louis that restored theaters, libraries, railway halls, and civic buildings. By that Christmas, the business still looked prestigious from the outside, but behind the polished photographs were overdue invoices, expensive loans, and a leadership team that preferred appearances over difficult truths. My father, Thomas Whitmore, understood historic construction, but avoided confrontation. My mother, Diane Whitmore, ran client relations and treated every family problem like a public relations issue. My older sister, Lauren Whitmore Hayes, was the creative director, the golden child who could turn charm into authority, even when someone else had done the work. I grew up as the dependable daughter who checked the numbers, solved emergencies, and was forgotten again once the crisis was over. I never joined the family company. Instead, I became an architectural acoustics consultant, the specialist design teams hire when a concert hall looks beautiful but sounds terrible, when a courtroom carries whispers across 40 feet, or when a restored train station turns every announcement into an echo. My work combined mathematics, materials science, field testing, and long nights inside empty buildings, listening for flaws no one else could hear. My mother called it sound decorating. Lauren told people I adjusted speakers. They mocked my profession until they needed my contacts, my reports, or an introduction to a theater board. Whenever I helped, Lauren publicly described me as someone supporting her vision. Whenever I declined unpaid work, my mother reminded me that family loyalty shouldn't come with conditions. I met Grant Mercer 3 years earlier during the rehabilitation of the Marlowe Radio Theater, an abandoned 1930s broadcast house in Kansas City. Grant was a structural engineer and the founder of Mercer Civic Renewal, a redevelopment firm known for rescuing difficult public projects. Our first conversation was an argument about whether the original plaster ceiling could survive the acoustic plan. He returned the next morning with revised calculations and coffee. I returned with a test model proving that both of us had been partly wrong. That became our rhythm: challenge, evidence, adjustment, respect. I told my family almost nothing about him because they treated private information like shared property. Lauren had once read messages on my unlocked phone and repeated details of a breakup at Thanksgiving. My mother defended her with the same words she used at Christmas. She was just joking. Another time, Mom invited a man I was dating to a fundraiser without asking me, seated him beside a donor's daughter, and spent the entire evening praising how well matched they looked. When I objected, I was told I was being too sensitive. Those moments taught me that people who mock boundaries are usually the first to resent them once those boundaries become real. Grant understood. He also kept his home life separate from business after a former partner had weaponized personal gossip during a municipal development deal. We dated quietly, cooked late dinners after site visits, and spent Sunday mornings wandering through salvage warehouses. He met my closest friend, Sophie Bennett. I met his sister, Claire Mercer. No one demanded a performance from either of us. 18 months before that Christmas, we were married in the reading room of a small municipal archive he had helped preserve. There were 11 guests, a lemon cake from a neighborhood bakery, and no family politics. I wore my wedding ring on a chain during field inspections because metal jewelry wasn't safe around certain equipment. Over time, the chain became a habit, and my family never noticed. I had considered telling them. Every attempt died beneath another joke about women marrying late, another demand for free work, or another reminder that Lauren's milestones mattered more than mine. Grant never pressured me. "Tell them when telling the truth feels safer than staying silent," he said. By Christmas, telling the truth no longer felt safe. It felt necessary. Whitmore and Rowe had begun pursuing the Orium Exchange, a freight terminal scheduled to become a market, rehearsal complex, and vocational campus. Mercer Civic Renewal was the only serious investor still considering the project. My family didn't know Grant was my husband. They also didn't know I had already reviewed their proposal and recognized entire pages of my confidential analysis copied into it. After my announcement, the room stayed silent long enough for me to hear ice shifting inside someone's glass. A cousin near the end of the table slowly lowered his phone, probably realizing the family joke he had been recording had just become something else entirely. My sister recovered first. "Very dramatic, Claire," she said, forcing out a laugh that no one joined. "Who is he?" My mother lowered her champagne glass but remained frozen in the middle of her toast. My father looked from me to the gold lettering on the redevelopment proposal beside his plate. Mercer Civic Renewal, Orium Exchange Partnership Review. "Grant Mercer," I said. "We were married 18 months ago." Colin stopped chewing. My sister's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. "That's impossible." I unlocked my phone, opened the wedding photograph I kept in a private album, and placed it in the center of the table. Grant and I stood inside the reading room of a restored municipal archive, sunlight stretching across the old oak floor behind us. He wore a charcoal suit without a tie. I wore a simple ivory dress and the expression of someone who had finally made a choice without waiting for her family's approval. 11 people had been there. None of them shared my last name. My father picked up the phone carefully, as though the image might disappear if he touched it too quickly. My mother leaned closer, her expression moving through disbelief, hurt, calculation, and finally, recognition. My sister barely looked at the photograph. Her eyes went straight to the proposal beneath my hand. "Does he know about the Orium project?" she asked. "Not." "Are you happy?" "Not." "Why didn't you tell us?" The first question out of her mouth was about the deal. "He knows exactly what your company submitted," I said. "What have you told him about us?" "That should worry you less than what you told him about me." I opened the proposal to page 14. The acoustic feasibility summary was mine. So were the reverberation projections, the vibration control diagrams, the seating absorption model, and the material schedule designed for the terminal's proposed performance hall. I had prepared the original report 2 years earlier for a nonprofit arts coalition that had considered leasing part of the building. The project died when a grant fell through, but the research remained protected under my consulting agreement. Every page had been marked confidential. I had shared a preliminary copy with my father after he asked whether the building could realistically support live performances without a complete interior rebuild. He had promised he only wanted to understand the technical risks. Now my work had been transferred into Whitmore and Rowe's investor package, with the copyright footer removed. My name appeared beneath a heading that read, Senior Technical Partnership, followed by a statement claiming I had agreed to serve as the company's lead acoustics advisor for the entire redevelopment. I had never agreed to anything. Beneath that statement was a digital signature that looked enough like mine to fool someone moving quickly through hundreds of pages. My father pulled the proposal toward him. Diane, what is this? My mother didn't answer him. She looked directly at my sister. Colin wiped his mouth. I was assured Claire had reviewed and approved the package. It was a working draft, my sister said. Nothing was final. You submitted it to an investment committee, I replied. That makes it more than a draft. Claire has helped the company before, she told the table as though my past generosity gave her permanent access to my name. She's sent us recommendations, reviewed materials, introduced people. We had every reason to believe she'd support this. Helping you before isn't lifelong consent, I said, and support is not a signature. My mother reached across the table, but I moved the proposal away from her hand. Whatever happened, we can correct it privately, she said. There is no reason your husband should make a multi-million-dollar decision based on a disagreement between sisters. Her hypocrisy was almost elegant. Less than 5 minutes earlier, she had laughed when I was described as a lonely 35-year-old woman. Now my marriage had become a corporate asset I had selfishly failed to disclose. Grant isn't withdrawing because I'm upset, I said. Mercer Civic's compliance team discovered inconsistencies before anyone knew I was connected to him personally. My father frowned. What inconsistencies? Revenue projections that don't match your tax filings, letters of subcontractor commitment from firms that deny issuing them, a financing statement listing personal guarantors who never agreed to guarantee anything, and my unauthorized signature. Colin's expression changed the moment I mentioned the guarantors. Which names were listed? He asked. My sister immediately cut him off. This is neither the time nor the place. Apparently, Christmas dinner is the place to discuss Claire's marriage, he said, but not the documents attached to our house. My mother whispered his name in warning. I continued. I learned about the proposal when Mercer Civic's general counsel contacted my office to verify my role. They didn't know I was Grant's wife. They knew I was the consultant whose copyrighted work appeared in a submission from a company claiming I had joined its technical team. My sister pushed back her chair. So you discussed our confidential finances with your husband behind our backs? No, I said. Your company placed my identity inside its confidential financial submission without my permission. My phone vibrated against the table. Grant was calling. He knew I planned to confront them and had asked me to text him when I was safe. I answered. Are you all right? He asked. I'm fine, I said. They know we're married. They also know about the proposal. My mother immediately adopted the polished voice she reserved for donors and city officials. Grant, this is Diane Whitmore. I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding. I looked at the phone. Grant heard the unspoken question in my silence. Put me on speaker, he said. I did. Mr. Mercer, my mother began. Lauren may have moved too quickly, but Claire has contributed informally to our company for years. There was never any intention to mislead anyone. A written representation supported by false documentation is not an informal contribution, Grant replied evenly. And it isn't a misunderstanding. My sister leaned toward the phone. Claire has complicated feelings about the family business. I respect her expertise, but she isn't objective where I'm concerned. My wife's feelings didn't create the discrepancies in your submission, Grant said. Her professional integrity is the reason one of them was identified before it created even greater legal exposure for everyone involved. The word wife landed harder than the wedding photograph. It made our marriage real in a way my family could no longer dismiss as another performance. My mother closed her eyes briefly. My father looked down at my ringless hand, then noticed the thin chain beneath my collar. My sister's expression hardened. Are you saying Mercer Civic is rejecting the proposal? Our investment committee will issue formal notice after the holiday. Until then, neither Whitmore and Rowe nor any representative acting on its behalf may use Claire's name, reports, credentials, diagrams, or imply her participation. Preserve all drafts and communications related to the submission. Any further questions should go through counsel. Grant, my mother said quickly, before you make a decision that could affect dozens of employees, perhaps we could arrange a private family meeting. The employees are precisely why this decision must be handled through proper review instead of family pressure, he replied. Claire, call me when you leave. I ended the call. No one spoke for several seconds. My mother stared at me as though I had personally placed every false number in the proposal. Claire, she finally said, lowering her voice, you have to fix this. Not, I'm sorry. Not, how could this have happened? Not, we should never have laughed at you. Her instinct was the same as it had always been. Lauren created the emergency, and I was expected to become the solution. I stood and reached for my coat. No, I said. For once, the person who created the problem will have to carry it. My sister stood as well. You can't walk in here, reveal a secret husband, threaten the company, and leave acting like you're innocent. I turned to face her. I didn't put Grant's name into your proposal. You did. I didn't attach my signature to a lie. You did. And I didn't make my marriage a weapon tonight. You turned my supposed loneliness into entertainment. The truth simply answered you. The room had gone so quiet that even the people who had laughed avoided looking at me. I opened the front door, but before stepping outside, I looked back at my mother. You told me she was just joking. Maybe tomorrow you can explain which part was funny. My mother followed me into the entryway. You can't leave after dropping something like this. Your sister made a mistake. Families solve mistakes. Families also prevent them, I replied. They don't laugh while one daughter humiliates another, then demand loyalty when money is involved. This is about the joke. The joke was only the clearest summary. For years, Lauren's cruelty had been treated like a personality trait the rest of us were responsible for managing. When she borrowed my belongings, I was told not to be possessive. When she repeated private details, I was told not to be so secretive. When she introduced my contacts as people she had cultivated herself, I was told not to compete with my sister. Every boundary I set proved I was cold. Every boundary she crossed proved she was outgoing. The worst incident happened 5 years earlier, when I redesigned the acoustics for a children's theater beneath an elevated train line. I developed a floating interior shell that reduced low-frequency vibration without forcing the nonprofit to abandon the building. Lauren saw my presentation during a family weekend. 3 months later, Whitmore and Rowe entered an awards competition using my diagrams as evidence of its innovative methodology. My logo had been removed, and her team received the credit. I discovered it when the awards committee invited me to serve as a juror. My mother begged me not to report the submission because public embarrassment could cost employees their jobs. My father promised it would be withdrawn. Lauren cried, called the images placeholders, and accused me of enjoying her humiliation. I agreed not to file a formal complaint. 2 weeks later, my mother told our relatives I had nearly destroyed the company over a formatting error. That was the moment I stopped confusing peace with repair. Grant knew that history before we got married. He had watched Lauren send me a 40-page bid package at midnight with the message, "You're the genius. Make this credible by morning." He never told me to cut them off. Instead, he asked, "What would contact look like if guilt weren't making the rules?" The answer was limited information, written agreements, and no access to my marriage until they could respect it. I didn't hide Grant because he was important. I hid us because our relationship was the first part of my life they had never been allowed to rename, compare, market, or borrow. My mother crossed her arms. "You excluded us from your wedding." "Yes." The direct answer startled her. I invited people who could be happy for me without turning the day into a competition, a client list, or a family negotiation. Behind the door, Lauren blamed Colin for approving the proposal. Colin insisted he had relied on her assurances. My father told them both to stop. My mother lowered her voice. "Mercer Civic was our last option. The bank has given us until January 15th to secure new capital. If this deal falls apart, we could lose both the project and the showroom." For half a second, old habits took over. I imagined reviewing the debt, calling Grant, and building a rescue plan. That was the role they preferred for me, ignored until competence became necessary. "Did Lauren know the deadline when she signed my name?" I asked. My mother looked away. The door opened. My father stepped into the hallway carrying a manila folder filled with lender notices, payroll warnings, and a draft list of personal guarantors. My name was included as a family principal with substantial outside income, even though I had never owned any part of Whitmore and Rowe. A handwritten note beside it read, "Claire will come around once Grant is committed." "That was only planning," my mother said. My father pulled the folder away from her. "Diane, stop." Then he looked at me. "I didn't approve this. I should have known. I should have asked." Lauren appeared in the doorway. "What do you want, Claire? My resignation? Do you want me to get down on my knees?" "I want you to stop asking what performance will make the consequences disappear." She laughed bitterly. "You finally have the powerful husband and the perfect career. Now you get to stand above everyone." There it was. The resentment hiding beneath years of jokes. Not fear that I was alone. Fear that I wasn't. "I never needed to stand above you," I said. "I just needed you to stop standing on me." Grant was waiting across the street because we had agreed I shouldn't drive if the confrontation became overwhelming. I climbed into his truck and handed him the folder. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Worse than the proposal?" He didn't tell me what to do. He simply touched the ring beneath my collar and waited while I finally allowed myself to shake. 3 days after Christmas, Mercer Civic formally ended negotiations. The letter cited material misrepresentations, unauthorized use of a consultant's credentials, and weak internal financial controls. It never mentioned our marriage. Grant insisted the record remain strictly professional, so no one could dismiss the decision as domestic revenge. The facts were damaging enough. The city suspended Whitmore and Rowe from the Orium bid. The bank refused to extend its deadline. Subcontractors demanded payment on overdue invoices. Colin's father hired an attorney after learning he had invested based on Lauren's claim that the Mercer deal was essentially complete. My father apologized without asking for anything. My mother sent me 14 messages, each ending with a request. Lauren wrote only one. "I hope you're enjoying this." On January 4th, my mother arrived at my office carrying a binder labeled Family Continuity Plan. It proposed that Grant purchase 49% of Whitmore and Rowe, assume part of the company's debt, and keep Lauren as president of creative operations. I would join the board, provide technical services for 5 years at a family rate, and publicly describe the forged signature as an administrative misunderstanding. It wasn't a rescue plan. It shifted the risk to Grant and me while preserving power for the people who had created the crisis. You said you wanted accountability, my mother told me. You can supervise Lauren from the board. I don't want to supervise her, I said. I want her to be responsible for herself. She's your sister. She's also the executive who submitted false information. My mother's composure cracked. 43 people depend on this company. Your grandfather started it with 2 employees and a borrowed truck. I understood the risk to those employees better than she realized, because I had already reviewed the numbers with an independent restructuring attorney. Saving the workers didn't require preserving Whitmore control. There is one structure I would support, I said. Whitmore and Rowe enters court-supervised restructuring. The showroom is sold. Employees receive priority for unpaid wages. The restoration division is offered to a qualified buyer or a worker cooperative. Dad may remain as a technical advisor. Lauren resigns from management, issues a factual correction regarding my work, and repays the legal costs related to the false submission. You and Dad release any claim that I'm responsible for family debt. Mercer Civic may bid through an open process, but I won't influence the price. You want to strip our name from our company. I want the people who actually perform the work to have a chance to keep their jobs. This is punishment. No, I said. Punishment would be using my marriage to destroy you. I'm refusing to use it to protect you from documented choices. After she left, I cried alone in the conference room. Doing the right thing didn't feel triumphant. It felt like accepting that the family I wanted wasn't the family standing outside my office making demands. Grant found me there. He told me my mother had called his office claiming our marriage made me biased. Counsel had preserved the voicemail. Part of me still wants to fix payroll, I admitted. Kindness doesn't require giving control back to the people who created the problem, he said. Together, we developed a lawful alternative. Mercer Civic would not rescue Whitmore and Rowe. Instead, it would support financing for a regional employee-owned restoration cooperative if the company's assets were sold through a transparent process. Grant recused himself from the internal vote. I agreed to provide limited paid consulting only if the cooperative won through an open bidding process. No secret leverage. No family discount. No erased consequences. When Lauren learned about the plan, she called me. You're giving our company to strangers. The people in that cooperative have completed most of your projects for years. You know what I mean? Yes, I said. They're strangers because they don't share our last name, even though you were willing to risk their jobs to protect your own. She started crying. Then she admitted the Christmas joke had been deliberate. She had heard I might be involved with someone important but couldn't figure out who it was. Calling me single in front of everyone was meant to force either a denial or a confession. You could have asked whether I was happy, I said. I didn't think you'd tell me. You were right. Then what was I supposed to do? Accept that access to me isn't something you can force. She confessed that making me look lonely had made her feel more successful. Then she asked whether resigning would make the investigation disappear. I told her the City Review and Mercer Civic's notice were based on evidence, not my emotions. She had spent years treating every system as though it were just another relationship she could manipulate. Now the evidence was answering her instead. Before hanging up, Lauren said, You have no idea what it's like to fail in front of everyone. You made me fail in front of everyone every time you turn my life into a joke, I replied. The difference is that I learned to keep living without making someone else smaller. Whitmore and Rowe filed for restructuring on January 12th. My father supported it after discovering that Lauren and my mother had hidden 2 creditor notices from him. My mother called him disloyal. He replied that pretending was no longer loyalty. It was the most honest sentence I had ever heard him say. The city's review found that Lauren had submitted my altered signature from her own account and instructed a junior coordinator to remove my copyright footer from 2 diagrams. The coordinator produced emails showing that she had questioned the instruction and had been told I had verbally approved everything. Lauren was barred from serving as a principal on municipal redevelopment contracts for 3 years. It didn't end her career, but it ended the version of her career that had been built on family protection and borrowed credibility. Colin moved out after learning she had also understated the personal guarantees connected to the company. I didn't celebrate. Their marriage wasn't my battlefield. Still, the consequence mattered. Lauren had spent years measuring my life by whether a man sat beside me at family dinners. Now appearances couldn't protect her own relationship from concealed debt and repeated dishonesty. My mother told relatives that Grant had engineered a hostile takeover because I was acting out a childhood grudge. That story quickly fell apart when Mercer Civic declined to bid on the showroom and instead supported the employee cooperative. Archway Restoration Partners purchased the equipment, active contracts, and company vehicles. 36 of the 43 employees received job offers. The remaining workers received priority wage claims and placement assistance. The Whitmore and Rowe name was not included in the sale. On the morning the workers removed the brass letters from the building, my father asked me to meet him across the street. He handed me a signed declaration stating that I had never been an owner, guarantor, or authorized representative of the company. He also gave me a personal letter apologizing for every time he had allowed Mom and Lauren to turn me into a resource, for pressuring me to overlook the old award submission, and for mistaking silence for innocence. "I don't expect forgiveness on a schedule," he wrote. "I just wanted the truth recorded somewhere other than inside my own head." It was the first apology anyone in my family had given me that contained no instruction for me. I hugged him, but I didn't tell him everything was fine. Instead, we began meeting once a month for breakfast. He accepted a paid advisory role with Archway and worked without carrying the family name as his authority. My mother stayed silent for 4 months. Then she came to a lecture where I spoke about acoustic accessibility in public buildings. Afterward, she waited until the room had emptied. "I watched you for 40 minutes, she said. "I realized I don't actually know what you do." "You could learn," I replied. She nodded. "I also realized the way we talked about you made it easier not to notice you." That sentence mattered because it placed responsibility where it belonged, on the behavior that had made ignorance so convenient. She asked whether she could meet Grant as my husband instead of as an investor. "Not yet," I said. She looked hurt, but she accepted the answer. Boundaries become real when they survive someone else's disappointment. Lauren's first genuine apology came later. She sent a formal correction to the Regional Preservation Association, the city, Archway, my attorney, and every former project director. She admitted using my diagrams without permission in both the old award submission and the Orium proposal. The language was plain, no misunderstandings, no placeholders, no references to shared family material. Then she wrote to me privately. "I kept thinking that if people saw you as lonely, they would stop seeing me as less capable. I was wrong about what that did to you, and what it made me. I don't expect you to trust me." I acknowledged the correction through my attorney. An apology can be meaningful without purchasing immediate access. Months later, I agreed to one conversation with Lauren in a therapist's office. She described taking an ethics course, accepting contract work outside historic redevelopment, and confronting how often she had turned envy into entitlement. "Did you hide your marriage because you hated me?" she asked. "No," I said. "I hid it because I loved my life enough to protect it." She cried quietly. I didn't rescue her from that feeling. I didn't punish her with it either. I simply let the truth remain in the room. Grant and my mother finally met that summer at the reopening of the Marlowe Radio Theater. She apologized for pulling him into our family's conflict. Grant answered gently, "It wasn't confusion. Claire was perfectly clear. You just didn't like the boundary." My mother looked at me, then nodded. "That's true." It was a small admission, but it was one she had been incapable of making at Christmas. 1 year after that Christmas dinner, Grant and I hosted 11 people in the archive reading room where we had been married. Sophie brought the same lemon cake. Claire arrived with her sons. My father spent 20 minutes explaining the building's steel trusses. My mother joined us for dessert after asking whether the invitation included her. It did. Lauren wasn't there. We had reached occasional conversations, not shared holidays. Both of us understood that trust is built through repetition, not declared simply because a year has passed. Archway Restoration Partners had completed its first profitable quarter. The former Whitmore and Rowe craftspeople now owned shares in the company they had spent years sustaining. My father served as a paid advisor without voting control. The Orium contract went elsewhere, but Archway won a smaller library restoration entirely on its own merit. No family name opened that door. Their work did. Lauren completed the city's ethics requirements and found a job coordinating vendor logistics for a trade show company. The title was less glamorous. The salary was lower. But the work was measurable. In therapy, she admitted that starting over embarrassed her until she noticed something unfamiliar. When a project succeeded, she knew exactly which part belonged to her. Colin returned home after months of counseling, though their marriage remained fragile. I didn't ask for details. Privacy isn't suspicious simply because it belongs to someone else. My mother changed more slowly. When relatives asked why they hadn't known about my wedding, she initially called me secretive. After I corrected her, she began saying, "Claire didn't feel safe sharing it with us." Eventually, she added, "We gave her reasons." Accountability wasn't one dramatic apology. It was telling the truth even when the old story made you look better. My acoustic accessibility framework became part of a national design guide, and I was chosen to lead the sound strategy for a science museum inside a former aircraft assembly plant. At the launch event, an interviewer asked Grant how it felt to be married to someone receiving so much attention. He smiled. "Normal. I was impressed by her before she even knew my middle name." Then he stepped aside so the next question came to me. He could stand beside me without standing in front of me. People sometimes ask whether revealing my marriage was an act of revenge. It wasn't. I didn't marry Grant to surprise my family. I didn't alter my signature. I didn't remove copyright notices. I didn't hide creditor warnings. And I didn't force Lauren to mock me. I simply told the truth at the exact moment they expected me to absorb another lie about myself. Then I refused to spend my marriage, my money, my expertise, or my reputation shielding them from the consequences of their own choices. The family company disappeared. The employees' work survived. My father lost authority but regained his integrity. My mother lost the social story she had spent years protecting, and slowly began learning how to build relationships without managing appearances. Lauren lost status and the certainty that someone else would always clean up after her. I lost the fantasy that one perfect explanation could transform people who benefited from misunderstanding me. On the anniversary of that Christmas dinner, my mother sent me a message. I laughed because stopping Lauren would have required me to admit that I encouraged the way she treated you. You deserved a mother who protected your dignity before she needed your help. I'm sorry. I thanked her for saying it so clearly. Then I told her trust would still take time. It wasn't a grand reunion. It was a door opened only as wide as I chose. That evening, I wore my wedding ring on my hand instead of on the chain around my neck. My father noticed first. My mother noticed second and smiled without making a speech. Grant reached beneath the table and gently touched my fingers. I once believed family peace meant preventing discomfort. Now I know that peace built on one person's silence is merely convenience for everyone else. Love doesn't require unlimited access. Forgiveness doesn't erase accountability. A joke that repeatedly targets the same wound isn't humor. It's a test of how much disrespect everyone else in the room is willing to tolerate. When I remember my sister asking whether it was hard to spend Christmas alone, I no longer remember the laughter first. I remember the silence after I set down my glass. "I've been married for a long time," I said. But what I was really telling them was this: I've had a full life for a long time. You simply never cared enough to look closely. And if someone you love keeps reducing your life to a joke, ask yourself this: are you protecting the relationship, or are you protecting the version of yourself that makes the relationship easier for them? Sometimes the strongest revenge is refusing to remain available for disrespect, building a life no one can borrow without your permission, and allowing the truth to carry every consequence you were once expected to prevent. We hope this story was both meaningful and entertaining. All characters, events, and situations in this story are entirely fictional and created for educational, reflective, and entertainment purposes. We hope it reminds you that your peace is not a reward other people get to approve. It is a right you are allowed to protect. Anyone who benefits from your pain may not understand your healing. Even so, you are still free to choose it.